I once thought the greatest tragedy of my life was my father leaving my mother for another woman. But I was wrong. The real pain began on an ordinary afternoon when our old house's electrical system malfunctioned. As the electrician and I descended into the damp, musty basement, a place I'd been forbidden to enter my entire childhood, a single sweep of his flashlight revealed a secret so horrifying it froze the blood in my veins. He dropped his tools, trembling, and whispered, "Pack your things and leave right now. Don't tell your parents. My name is Jacob Caldwell. I'm 24, a recent college graduate, and honestly, I'm just trying to make sense of a life that feels warped, like a puzzle piece nobody quite knows where to fit." My story, the real story, begins much earlier, in a 3-story craftsman house in the Portland suburbs where the first cracks in my world started to appear. We were middle class, comfortable, but not lavish. My father, Samuel Caldwell, was 52 then, a tall man, deep voice, an almost intimidating air of authority. He owned a small construction company, and his sharp eyes could dissect a blueprint in seconds. But he never truly saw me. He was consumed by his business, his ambition, his grand visions. I believe that ambition, that relentless drive, created the chasm between him and my mother, Monica. My mother. She was gentle, with soft brown hair and a smile like warm autumn sunlight. I knew she loved me. She'd spend hours telling me fairy tales, stroking my hair during scary thunderstorms. But her marriage to my father was fragile, like a beautiful house built on sand, one big wave away from crumbling. I still remember those nights. My mother, silent in the kitchen, eyes red, while my father grumbled about money or work. I was just 10, clutching my worn-out teddy bear in bed, my young heart constricted by the arguments echoing through the thin walls. When I was 10, the wave finally hit. My parents divorced. I remember that morning so vividly. My mother sat on the sofa, a small suitcase by her feet. Her trembling hands pulled me into a desperate hug. "Jacob, you are everything to me," she choked out, tears streaming. But the court didn't see it that way. My father had the stable job, the big house, the promises of a better life. My mother, with her meager part-time work, stood no chance. She moved a few hours away to live with my grandparents. As that door closed behind her, I felt a piece of my heart rip away. I stood frozen, watching her fade, convinced I'd done something wrong. I became a different boy. The laughter vanished, replaced by a quiet vigilance. Everything I loved felt fragile, ready to disappear. My father, immersed in his empire, hardly noticed. I was just a minor detail in his grand scheme. 2 years later, at 12, Serena arrived. She swept into our lives, into my father's life, taking the Caldwell name within months. She was much younger, barely in her 30s, with glossy blonde hair and a smile that always felt practiced. Insincere, she charmed my father, made him laugh in a way I hadn't seen since my mother left. But her gaze always passed right through me, cold and indifferent. "Jacob, are you okay?" she'd ask, but the words were empty, a formality at dinner. My father changed, too. He became almost dependent on her, letting her orchestrate everything. From choosing schools for John and Lily, my half-siblings 12 and 14 years younger than me, to deciding dinner. John loved soccer, Lily loved cartoons, and they were sweet, adorable kids. But I was a phantom in that house, an outsider drifting through hallways that once echoed with my mother's laughter, now filled with an unsettling estrangement. The Craftsman house, my childhood home, now felt different. It was still beautiful, but an invisible fog had settled inside. The air felt heavy, but it was the basement, as we called it, that truly unnerved me. Deep underground, an old wooden staircase plunged into absolute darkness. The musty smell, the chilling cold, the sound of seeping water, it made me shudder. As a child, I longed to explore it, but Serena strictly forbade it. "It's dangerous, Jacob," she'd say, her voice soft yet sharp as a blade. My father never objected, and I, a 12-year-old boy, dare not question her. Still, every time I passed that door, an inexplicable unease washed over me. Something was lurking. The years that followed were a blur of profound loneliness. I learned to mask my feelings, to offer polite smiles, to nod at my father's ambitious monologues. Deep down, I was always a stranger in my own home. My only lifeline was the phone calls with my mother. Monica, miles away, was a beacon in my darkest days. On weekends, I'd pour out my heart to her, my school, my dreams, the sorrows I couldn't voice to anyone else. "You're stronger than you think, Jacob," her warm voice would reassure me. My father, credit where it's due, never forbade these calls. It was perhaps the one decent thing he did. Those conversations were a balm for my soul, but they couldn't fill the gaping void left by the divorce. I missed the old days, the family dinners, my mother's soft humming in the kitchen, my father's rare hugs. Now, the dining table was Serena's stage, perfectly arranged dishes, polite but empty conversation. John and Lily were lively, but I just sat there, swallowing bites of tasteless food, a silent observer. I was no longer part of this family. Serena expertly relegated me to the sidelines. She never said it directly, but her sidelong glances, the way she doted on John and Lily while ignoring me, spoke volumes. I once overheard her telling my father, "Jacob's grown up. He'll manage on his own." Her voice was soft, but the coldness bit deep. My father just mumbled. He had chosen her. My teenage years were a blur of quiet determination. School became my sanctuary, books my escape. I dreamt only of leaving that house behind. At 18, I finally did. I moved to Portland for college, eager for independence. But even then, the Craftsman house, especially that dark, forbidden basement, haunted my subconscious. I had no idea that years later, that very basement would rip my world apart, forcing me to redefine everything I thought I knew about my life. Now, at 24, I'm a college graduate, navigating the messy landscape of unformed ambitions. My small apartment in downtown Portland is a constant symphony of city life. Coffee smells, car horns, hurried footsteps. It's just enough space for me, my books, and a quiet existence. I support myself with a part-time job at an old bookstore, supplemented by a modest allowance from my mother, Monica. She's my unwavering anchor. Every month, a little money arrives, tucked into hastily written letters brimming with encouragement. "You'll find your path, Jacob," she always writes. Those letters, kept safe in a small wooden box, are a constant reminder that someone, somewhere, truly cares. I often drive a few hours to visit her and my grandparents. Those weekends, sipping hot tea in her warm kitchen, listening to her stories, I feel like myself again. A Jacob who doesn't need to hide, who doesn't need to brace himself against the world. My father and Serena? That's a different story. I kept my distance, only visiting the Craftsman house when John or Lily texted me. My relationship with my father was a fragile thread, stretched almost to breaking. Serena, ever the perfect stepmother, greeted me with polite inquiries and calculated smiles. But I knew the distance between us was vast, unforgiving. Then a few months ago, things began to unravel. My body stopped feeling like my own. Sudden, skull-splitting headaches. Dizziness so severe the world would tilt. An inexplicable, bone-deep fatigue clung to me constantly. I'd always been healthy, rarely even catching a cold. These symptoms were alarming. I saw doctors, underwent every test imaginable, brain scans, blood work, the works. Nothing. Stress, Jacob, they'd say, prescribing supplements, advising rest. I took them religiously, but nothing changed. The exhaustion was a persistent, invisible shadow. At the same time, Serena's behavior took a strange turn. Her phone calls, once rare, became frequent, her voice dripping with syrupy sweetness. "Jacob, it's been a while since you came home. Why don't you join us for dinner?" she'd coo. It startled me. Part of me yearned to believe she was sincere, that after all these years, she genuinely wanted to bridge the chasm between us. But every time I heard her voice, a cold shiver ran down my spine. Something was deeply, unsettlingly off. I started visiting more often, drawn partly by Serena's insistent invitations, partly by my desire to see John and Lily. Dinners were in the familiar dining room, bathed in a warm yellow glow, the air thick with the aroma of food. But at the table, a gnawing unease settled in. The meticulously prepared dishes sometimes had an odd taste. Not spoiled, but something metallic, chemical, utterly indescribable. I once asked Serena about it. She simply smiled, claiming it was a new recipe. My father, as usual, was oblivious, eating quickly before burying himself in his phone. John and Lily chatted happily, unaware. I was the only one there, spoon in hand, feeling like I was swallowing dread with every bite. The feeling intensified whenever I stayed overnight. I'd jolt awake to strange sounds from the basement, clanging metal, as if something heavy was being dragged across the floor. An acrid smell, like incense mixed with something foul, would seep through the crack under my door. I'd lie there, heart hammering, straining to listen. But when I'd creep into the hallway, it was always dark, silent, as if my imagination had conjured it all. The next morning, I'd find the basement door locked tight, an impenetrable barrier. I asked Serena about it once, trying to sound casual. "It's nothing, Jacob," she'd said, her eyes flicking over me like a snake's tongue. Just for safety. My health continued to plummet. The headaches became excruciating, forcing me into dark rooms, clutching my throbbing temples. Dizziness, fatigue, a profound heaviness. They became my constant companions. I began tracking my symptoms, desperate for a pattern, a cause. Was it stress, as the doctor suggested? My diet? But a chilling instinct whispered to me. Something was fundamentally wrong in that house, in those meals, in Serena's unnerving glances. I wanted to dismiss it as loneliness, as an overactive imagination, but the intuition clung to me like a shadow, urging caution. I tried to stay calm, to rationalize. Weeks passed. I focused on job interviews, extra shifts, my mother's calls. But the thought of the Craftsman house made my heart race. I started avoiding it, making excuses to decline Serena's increasingly frequent dinner invitations. By the way, if you're still with me, if you're still trying to piece together this twisted mystery, make sure to hit that subscribe button. More unbelievable stories are coming, and you won't want to miss what happens next. One Saturday afternoon, while cleaning my apartment, I realized I'd left some crucial university documents in an old photography camera at my father's house. I hesitated. The family was on a trip, the house would be empty. But I needed those items. So, I decided to make a quick stop. The Portland sky was heavy, threatening rain. I pulled into the driveway of the Craftsman house, a place that was once home. Eerie quiet. No Lily's laughter, no father's grumbling, no Serena's saccharine voice. They were on vacation, and I hadn't been invited. A familiar pang of hurt, quickly dismissed. I unlocked the front door with the spare key my father had given me. Silence. Only the steady tick of the wall clock. I went to my old room, where a few remnants of my past life remained. On the dusty desk, I found my folder and camera. As I reached for them, my eyes landed on a framed photo. My father, Serena, John, and Lily, all beaming in some sunlit park. I wasn't in it. A sharp chill snaked down my spine. I stood frozen, years of being pushed to the margins suffocating me. I shook it off, shoved the items into my bag, and turned to leave. That's when the lights flickered. A sharp click. The house plunged into absolute darkness. My heart thundered. Rain began to patter outside, but there was no storm, no lightning. The electrical system had simply died. I couldn't leave the house like this. I called a local. Electrician. Mike, a middle-aged man with a warm, gruff voice, promised to be right over. He arrived 15 minutes later, toolbox in hand. After a quick check, he shook his head. Breaker's fine. Must be the main system. Where's the main electrical box? My heart leaped. Down in the basement, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. But I don't go down there often. Mike's eyebrow arched. He walked to the basement door, inspecting the heavy, rusty lock. Locked up this tight? Got treasure down there or something? He joked, but my smile was weak. Serena's warning echoed in my mind. It's dangerous, Jacob. Don't go down there. As a child, I'd obeyed, avoiding conflict. But now, standing before that door, a cold shiver ran through me. Something was profoundly wrong, and I couldn't ignore it anymore. Should we wait for my dad? I asked, my voice a whisper. He might know more about the system. Mike shrugged. You can wait, but this house will be dark for days. I just need to check the box. Won't take long. He was right. I took a deep breath. All right, I'll come with you. Mike nodded, pulling heavy-duty bolt cutters from his toolbox. The grinding sound of metal against metal screamed through the quiet house, sending goosebumps crawling up my arms. With a strong twist, the lock snapped. The basement door groaned open, its hinges screaming like a long-imprisoned lament. A wave of cold air rushed out, carrying a thick, musty odor. But mixed with it was something else. Sharp, acrid, like dried blood and burning incense. My throat tightened. A cold prickle spread across my skin. We descended the old wooden staircase, each step groaning under our weight. The weak flashlight beam barely cut through the oppressive darkness. Mike swept his light around, grazing stained concrete walls, dusty shelves, and corners I instinctively avoided. Electrical box must be around here, he muttered, but his voice was thin, trembling. He felt it too. I didn't answer. My gaze snagged on a rough wooden table in a dimly lit corner, draped with a black cloth. On it, half-burned black candles stood sentinel, their wax dripping like hardened tears. In the center, a small glass jar, glinting, held a dark red liquid. My heart hammered. I stepped closer, and a sharp, unmistakable stench of blood hit me. Right next to the jar was a crude cloth doll, no bigger than my hand, pierced with rusted pins. And on its fabric face, clumsily stitched in red thread, was my name, Jacob. My breath hitched. The air felt thick, suffocating. Good God! Mike whispered, his flashlight freezing. He stumbled back, his face ghostly pale. What the hell is this? He stammered, shaking. I could only nod. Words failed me. Then I saw the small wooden box, its lid open, revealing tiny, milky white animal bones, bird or rat, mixed with charred paper talismans covered in bizarre symbols. My head spun. This wasn't real. This was a nightmare. I swung my flashlight to the wall, and my heart stopped. A photograph. It was me from college, smiling, carefree, utterly naive. Around my picture, a crude circle of red paint, surrounded by more unsettling symbols. On a nearby shelf, an open notebook lay sprawled, filled with handwritten scribbles. My name, Jacob Caldwell, repeated over and over like a relentless curse. You need to call the police, Mike choked out, his voice barely audible. This isn't normal, Jacob. I've never seen anything like this. He retreated further, eyes wide with terror. I wanted to reassure him, to deny it, but I couldn't. The pieces slammed together in my mind, forming a horrifying picture I desperately wanted to reject. The headaches, the dizziness, the unexplained fatigue. Not random. The metallic taste in Serena's meals. Her probing gaze, as if she were measuring me. The clanging noises from the basement at night. The times I'd seen her slip down here when the house was asleep. All those dismissed details now stood out with terrifying clarity. Serena, my stepmother. She wasn't just distant. She was doing something far more sinister. Dark ritual. A curse. A plot to destroy me. I stood there, frozen, my trembling hand gripping my phone. My heart pounded, threatening to burst from my chest. I wasn't just the abandoned son, pushed to the family's fringes. I was the target of something dark, malevolent, incomprehensible. I stared at the cloth doll, my name stitched into its grotesque face, feeling an invisible hand squeeze my heart. Why? Why was Serena doing this? And my father? Did he know? Was he part of this twisted scheme? I pulled out my phone, switched to camera, and started taking pictures of everything. The candles, the blood-filled jar, the doll, my desecrated photo, the cursed notebook. Each click was a piece of evidence, a desperate attempt to preserve the truth before it could be erased. I didn't know what I'd do with them, but I knew I had to act. Fear could not consume me. Mike, still in shock, urged, Jacob, we have to get out of here. It's not safe. I nodded, but my feet felt rooted. Why did they want to destroy me? The question hammered in my brain. My father, a stranger for years. Serena, with her fake smiles and cold eyes. John and Lily, innocent pawns in this dark game. I turned, each step up the creaking stairs heavy, as if I dragged the weight of the entire world behind me. Mike followed, silent, shaken. When we emerged, I closed the basement door, but the dread clung to me. I had just uncovered a secret I could never unsee. The Craftsman house, once my home, was a trap, and I was the prey. I clutched my phone, staring at the horrifying photos on the screen. My legs trembled. Mike, the electrician, was a few feet away, clutching his toolbox, his face still frozen in shock. "Jacob," he managed, his voice strained, "you need to call the police. Right now." I nodded, but my hand shook so violently, I nearly dropped the phone. Taking a deep, ragged breath, I dialed 911. A calm female voice answered. "911, what's your emergency?" I cleared my throat, forcing myself not to stammer. "I'm Jacob Caldwell. I'm at my father's house in the Portland suburbs. I just found something really strange in the basement. I think it's a cult or something dangerous. Please come quickly." My voice faltered, but I managed to describe the doll, the blood, the symbols. The operator paused, then asked for the address. Mike, seeing my distress, gestured for the phone. "I'm Mike, the electrician," he said, his voice steadier than mine. "I can confirm what he's saying. Everything down here is very, very wrong. You need to send someone immediately." Mike's confirmation seemed to accelerate things. The operator instructed us to wait outside, not to touch anything. Mike and I stood in the drizzling rain under a gray sky. I gripped my phone, the photos on its screen a desperate shield against self-doubt. Mike said nothing, just stared down the street, his tension palpable. Less than 20 minutes later, a police car arrived. Officer Harris, a middle-aged man with salt and pepper hair, and Officer Lopez, a younger woman with sharp eyes. "Jacob Caldwell?" Harris asked, his hand near his holstered gun. "Yes, that's me. I called. There's something really strange in the basement. You need to see it." Harris raised an eyebrow, exchanging a skeptical glance with Lopez. "Strange how?" Lopez asked, her tone hinting at disbelief. I understood. My story sounded like a low-budget horror film. There's a doll with my name on it, symbols on the walls, and a jar that looks like it's filled with blood. I insisted, showing them the photos. Harris glanced at them, but remained unconvinced. "Could be a prank," he said calmly, "or some weird art project. We'll check, but stay calm." Blood rushed to my face. "This isn't a prank," I said, my voice hardening. "I'm not imagining this. Please just go down there and see." Lopez nodded, motioning to Harris. "All right, lead the way." I took another deep breath, opened the front door, and guided them to the basement. Mike followed, keeping a cautious distance. The wooden stairs creaked, the musty, acrid smell intensifying. I flicked on my flashlight, illuminating their path. When we reached the bottom, I pointed to the black draped table. Harris and Lopez swept their flashlights around. I watched their expressions shift, skepticism melting into shock. Harris stopped at the doll. "Jesus," he muttered, almost inaudibly. Lopez stepped closer, her eyes on the blood-filled jar, then on my photo encircled by red paint and strange symbols. She exchanged a look with Harris. "No doubt now. This isn't a prank," Lopez said, her voice grim. "We need to seal this place off." Harris nodded, pulling out his radio for backup. I stood there, feeling the world crumble. My deepest fears, now validated by the police. This wasn't my imagination. Something truly horrific was happening, right here in the house I once called home. Soon, an investigative team swarmed in, with cameras, evidence bags, and unfamiliar equipment that documented everything. Detective Carter, a tall, serious officer, asked me to recount the entire incident. Sitting in the dark living room, illuminated by their flashlights, I poured out my story. The headaches, the dizziness, the strange taste in the food, Serena's unsettling behavior, the noises from the basement. Carter took meticulous notes, nodding occasionally. "Do you think anyone in your family is involved?" he asked, his gaze piercing. I hesitated. "I think it's Serena," I said, my voice trembling. "She always forbade me from the basement. And the meals! I always felt worse after eating here." I paused, my father's image flashing in my mind. "My dad? I'm not sure. but I don't think he's entirely innocent. Carter nodded, silent. He told me to stay in touch, promising a thorough investigation. The house was sealed with yellow tape. As the police cars pulled away, I stood in the front yard, rain soaking my shoulders. A strange mix of relief. Someone finally believed me, and dread washed over me. My family, what was left of it, wasn't just broken. It was festering with a dark secret, and I was at its very heart. That night, I didn't go back to my apartment. I drove straight to my mother's house, a few hours away. When I arrived, she and my grandparents were in the living room, bathed in the soft glow of a lamp. I told them everything, from the snapped lock to the horrors I'd found. My mother listened, initially skeptical, her eyes wide with worry. "Jacob, are you sure?" she whispered, trembling. I pulled out my phone and showed them the pictures. The cloth doll, the blood, my photo. My mother and grandparents were stunned. My grandfather, a man of few words, just shook his head, muttering, "I've never seen anything like this." My mother pulled me into a tight embrace, tears streaming down her face. "My boy," she choked. I sat in her arms, feeling a piece of my heart shatter. Days passed. I stayed at my mother's, trying to find solace in her warm kitchen and comforting stories. But every time I closed my eyes, the basement flooded my mind. The doll, the blood, the symbols. I constantly checked my phone, waiting for news. Carter had promised to follow up, but the waiting was excruciating, like teetering on the edge of a cliff. Then one morning my phone buzzed. It was Carter. "Jacob," he said, his voice grave, "you need to come to your father's house. Now, your family just returned. We need you here for a confrontation." My heart pounded. "I'll be right there," I said, forcing my voice steady. My mother looked at me, eyes filled with worry. "Do you want me to come with you?" she asked. I shook my head. "I have to do this alone, Mom." She hugged me fiercely, as if to transfer her strength. As I drove, Portland's gray sky mirrored my mood. Pulling onto the familiar street, I saw my father's car, suitcases haphazardly strewn in the driveway. They were back. I took a deep breath, stepped out. My heart hammered so loudly I could hear it. The front door was wide open, and my father's angry voice boomed from inside. "What is this nonsense? Who dare put police tape on my house?" I stepped into the living room. The air seemed to freeze. My father, Samuel, stood flushed with rage. Serena was beside him, her blonde hair neatly pulled back. Her eyes flickered when she saw me, just for a second. John and Lily huddled in a corner, small and bewildered. "Jacob," my father snarled, his voice dropping but still sharp. "What the hell is going on?" Before I could speak, Serena cut in, her voice icy but controlled. "Richard, I've already called the police. They said they're sending someone to explain. This must be a mistake. Our house isn't a crime scene." My father waved his phone, frustration thick in his voice. "I just spoke to them. They said there was a report from some witness about our basement." Before he finished, police sirens wailed outside. Detective Carter walked in, followed by Officers Harris and Lopez and another investigative team. "Mr. Samuel Caldwell, Mrs. Serena Caldwell," Carter said, his voice calm but firm. "We need your cooperation regarding some serious concerns about this house." Serena smiled, a stiff, brittle mask. "There must be a misunderstanding, officer," she cooed, saccharine as ever. "We just got back. We know nothing." My father nodded, his gaze darting between me and Carter. "Exactly. I want an explanation now." Carter didn't engage. He gestured to me. "Jacob, can you tell us what you saw?" I took a shaky breath, the weight of every eye in the room pressing down. My voice started shaky, then solidified. "I came here to pick up some things. The power went out. I called an electrician. We went to the basement." I paused, locking eyes with Serena. "Down there I recounted every gruesome detail. The room fell utterly silent. My father's frown deepened. Serena froze, just for a beat, before regaining her composure. "Jacob, what are you talking about?" my father demanded, disbelief thick in his voice. "Are you making this up for attention?" But I wouldn't back down. I pulled out my phone, opened the photos, and handed it to Carter. He held the screen up for my father and Serena to see. "This is what we found," Carter said, his voice hard. "And we need an explanation from both of you." Serena let out a dry, unnatural laugh. "Officer, these are just spiritual items," she chirped. "Things I use to pray for family safety. There's nothing dangerous." She looked at me, her eyes cold, but still holding that calculated smile. "Jacob, you've misunderstood. I'd never do anything to hurt you." Blood rushed to my face. I stepped forward, facing her, my voice shaking but absolutely resolute. "You're lying," I said, each word torn from my chest. "What did you do to me?" "The headaches, the fatigue, the strange taste in the food. It was all you, wasn't it? You wanted me to waste away." My father shot to his feet, his face crimson. "Jacob, that's enough," he roared. "You don't talk to your stepmother like that. This is nonsense, a stupid prank." But I didn't flinch. I looked him dead in the eyes, unafraid for the first time. "Did you know about this, Dad? Or are you part of it, too?" I asked, my voice low, sharp as a knife. He froze, his eyes flickering, but he didn't answer. Carter raised a hand, his voice cutting through the tension. "Mr. and Mrs. Caldwell, we have clear evidence of a ritualistic setup in the basement, with items specifically targeting Jacob. This isn't a joke. We need a clear explanation, or we'll proceed according to the law." Serena started to unravel, her voice frantic. "I told you it's just for prayers. I don't know anything about pins or blood." But her panicking eyes betrayed her. My father stood silent, hands clenched, a man wrestling with his own soul. I looked at him, a desperate hope flaring. Would he defend me? Would he finally be my father? He just lowered his head, mute. Then, more sirens. Another investigative team arrived, carrying paperwork and an arrest warrant. Carter looked at my father and Serena, his voice cold as steel. "Samuel Caldwell. Serena Caldwell. You're under arrest for conspiracy to commit premeditated murder." An officer stepped forward, reading their rights, while Lopez and Harris moved in to cuff them. Serena erupted, bursting into tears, not of remorse, but pure, furious struggle. "You can't do this. I didn't do anything." My father, by contrast, was utterly silent, his face ashen, as if his entire world had just collapsed. As they cuffed them, I heard soft sobbing from the staircase. John and Lily stood there, eyes red and terrified, watching their parents being led away. Lily ran to me, hugging me tightly, crying, "Jacob, what's happening?" I held her, speechless. John stood still, fists clenched, his eyes burning with anger and pain. As the police escorted my father and Serena to the cars, I stood frozen at the door, watching them disappear behind the flashing red and blue lights. Serena glanced back, her fury now unmasked, a venomous glare. My father didn't look at me, didn't say a word. My heart felt crushed, heavy with an unbearable sadness. Yet, at the same time, a strange wave of relief washed over me. The family I desperately clung to for so long, the perfect facade of my father, Serena, John, and Lily, was finally revealed as something rotten, steeped in lies and terrifying darkness. I stood there, under the drizzling rain, watching the police cars fade into the distance. Carter patted my shoulder, his voice softer now. "You did well, Jacob. We'll keep investigating. Stay in touch." I nodded, my mind reeling. The truth was out, but it left a gaping void in me, part loss, part freedom. A few days later, as the police continued their search of the Craftsman house, Detective Carter called me. His voice was serious. "Jacob," he said, "we found some important documents in your father's house. Some of them concern you. We've contacted a lawyer, Mr. Collins, who worked with your family." A chill snaked through me. Documents about me? I agreed to meet them the next morning. What other secrets were still waiting? Mr. Collins's office was downtown, warm wood and large windows. Mr. Collins himself was a man in his 60s, silver-haired, gold-rimmed glasses. His smile was kind, but his eyes held a gravity that unnerved me. "Jacob, please sit," he said, gesturing to the chair across his desk. Carter stood in the corner, a silent presence of reassurance. On the desk lay a thick, yellowed file. "Jacob," Mr. Collins began, his voice deep and clear, "what I'm about to tell you may be difficult, but you need to know the truth." He pushed the file towards me, opening it to a page bearing the familiar signatures of my grandparents. "This is documentation of a trust fund," he explained, "established years ago by your grandparents, Henry and Eleanor Caldwell. It's worth approximately $2 million, and it's in your name. You inherit it fully when you turn 25. I sat there, stunned. $2 million? The air thickened around me, pressing against my chest. "I don't understand," I stammered. "Why didn't I know?" Mr. Collins sighed, pushing his glasses up. "Until you came of age, all documents were sent to your legal guardian, your father, Samuel. He's known about this for years." Mr. Collins's words hit me like a physical blow. My father knew. Serena, my stepmother, must have known too. Then, every piece of the twisted puzzle clicked into place. Everything that had happened. They wanted me dead. If I were gone, the trust fund would default to my father, and Serena, with her cunning, would surely find a way to claim it. I clenched my fists, nails digging into my palms, trying to contain the volcano of anger and pain erupting within me. Carter stepped forward, a hand on my shoulder. "We're investigating when Samuel and Serena began planning this," he said. "What you found in the basement, combined with these documents, provides strong evidence of their motive." I nodded, my mind numb. My father, the man who once carried me on his shoulders, who taught me to tie my shoes. He chose money over me. Serena, with her fake smiles and honeyed words, had orchestrated a sinister plot against my life. My heart felt torn, shredded. Yet, a cold clarity settled over me. All those years of loneliness, of feeling like a ghost in my own family, they finally made sense. I left Mr. Collins's office with a copy of the trust fund documents and a storm raging in my heart. On the way back to my apartment, I stopped at a small park, sitting on a bench. Memories flooded in. My grandparents, Henry and Eleanor. My grandfather, with his white hair and warm voice, teaching me knots, identifying plants, instilling in me that honesty was the most precious thing. "Jacob, live in a way you're never ashamed of yourself," he'd said, his eyes shining. My grandmother, gentle as a summer breeze, held me close, sang folk songs, and cooked meals whose aromas I still cherish. When my parents divorced, they were my rock. My grandmother, sharing stories in the kitchen. My grandfather, showing me how to tend the garden, as if to say life goes on, no matter the pain. My grandfather passed when I was 13, my grandmother a year later. They left a void. But now, holding these documents, I realized they had never truly left me. This trust fund, $2 million, wasn't just money. It was their love, their final powerful shield. The cruel irony? That same love had become the reason my father and Serena wanted me gone. Pain for the betrayal, gratitude for their enduring protection. I felt them watching me, and I vowed not to let greed or malice destroy what they believed in me. That evening, back in my small apartment, I opened the old photo album my mother had sent. I found a picture of me, an 8-year-old boy, beaming between my grandparents at a summer picnic. Sunlight filtered through the trees. I touched the photo, feeling their warmth. "I'll live worthy of this legacy," I whispered, my voice choked. "I won't let greed ruin what you believed in me." The months that followed were a painful blur of court hearings and sensational headlines. Just a few months after their arrest, my father, Samuel Caldwell, and my stepmother, Serena, stood trial. I didn't attend every session. I wasn't sure I could face them. But I followed every detail through Carter's calls and the local news. The Caldwell family, once a quiet, middle-class household, was now a public spectacle. "Murder plot in Craftsman home," one headline shrieked. "Cult of greed, horrifying secrets in the basement," screamed another. Each word felt like a physical blow. The trial dragged on. My photos, the expert analysis confirming animal blood, the obscure occult symbols, and the testimonies of Mike, Mr. Collins, and myself painted an undeniable picture. Serena was the mastermind, meticulously orchestrating the horrific rituals. My father, though not directly involved in the rituals, was found guilty of complicity. He knew about the trust fund, and he chose not to stop Serena. On the day of sentencing, I sat alone in my apartment, clutching my phone. When Carter called, his voice was steady, yet somber. Jacob, the court has reached a verdict. Samuel Caldwell has been sentenced to 25 years for conspiracy to commit murder. Serena Caldwell received 30 years for her role as the mastermind and for the occult activities. I remained silent, letting the numbers echo in my mind. 25 years. 30 years. No triumph. Only a profound, aching sadness, as if something precious had been lost forever. The Caldwell family, once my father's pride, was now a global stain. I hung up, sinking into my chair, staring out at the falling rain. It felt like the sky was weeping, trying to wash away what remained of the past. Time became a gentle healer. I found a stable job at a counseling center, working part-time while preparing for graduate school. The headaches, the dizziness, they gradually faded, as if my body finally understood the threat was gone. I kept in touch with John and Lily, but each meeting was tinged with their unspoken pain. They didn't blame me, but the weight of their parents' actions was crushing them. I tried to be there, but the distance felt insurmountable. Then came my 25th birthday, 2 years since that horrifying discovery. I didn't want a celebration. That evening, I drove to my mother's house. She and my grandparents had prepared a small party. The kitchen smelled of freshly baked cookies and a simple chocolate cake with "Happy Birthday," Jacob set on the table. My mother hugged me, her eyes shining with joy, but a hint of worry remained. "You've really grown up," she said, ruffling my hair just like she did when I was a child. My grandparents, though older, smiled warmly, sharing stories, trying to conjure the carefree days of my youth. I blew out the candles, cut the cake, and laughed with them. But deep down, I knew this wasn't just a birthday. It was the beginning of a new chapter, finally free from the crushing weight of the past. The next morning, Mr. Collins called. I knew what it meant. Stepping into his office, he greeted me with his kind, familiar smile. On his desk lay a new file and a pale yellow envelope. "Jacob," he said warmly, "today is the day you officially become the legal beneficiary of the trust fund your grandparents left you. $2 million, all yours." He pushed the file towards me, explaining the legal specifics, but I barely heard him. My mind drifted back to my grandparents, to days spent running through their garden. Then, Mr. Collins handed me the envelope. "This is from your grandparents," he said gently. "They wrote it before they passed, with instructions to give it to you when you turn 25. My hands trembled as I took it. My grandmother's soft, elegant handwriting spelled my name on the front. "Thank you," I choked out, emotion swelling within me. "For everything." That afternoon, I walked to a nearby park where the maple trees blazed in vibrant red. I sat on a bench, opened the envelope, and began to read. Their words came alive, speaking directly to my heart. "Dear Jacob," it began, "you are our greatest joy. No matter how hard life gets, no matter what challenges you face, remember that you are stronger than you know. We left this trust for you not just for a better life, but so you can live true to your heart. Live kindly, honestly, and never let darkness dim the light inside you. Love you forever, Grandpa Henry and Grandma Eleanor." Tears streamed down my face, but I smiled. In that moment, a profound sense of release washed over me. I finally had a home. Not the craftsman house, steeped in darkness, but a home within my own heart. My grandparents, though gone, were still with me, their loving words a guiding light. A few weeks later, a letter arrived at my apartment. From the Oregon State Penitentiary. A plain white envelope. My father's scrolled handwriting. Samuel Caldwell. My heart raced. I sat at my table, hands trembling, and opened it. The short lines, written in blue ballpoint, seemed to take immense effort. "Jacob, I know you don't want to see me, but need to talk to you one last time. As your father, I don't expect forgiveness, but please let me see you. You're still my son. Samuel." I read it over and over, each word a needle in my soul. Father. The word felt foreign, a relic from another life. I thought of his indifference, the years he chose work, chose Serena, chose money over me. I thought of the basement, the doll, the trust fund they were willing to kill me for. Part of me wanted to tear the letter to shreds, to erase him. But another part, a quiet, insistent urge, told me to face him. Not for reconciliation, but for closure. I spent sleepless nights staring at the ceiling, wondering if I had the strength to walk into that room, to look into his eyes, to say goodbye. Finally, I decided, not for him, but for myself. I needed to end the past, to break the chains that held me back. I called the prison, confirmed the visit. The next morning, I drove there, my heart heavy, but my resolve unshaken. The Oregon State Penitentiary, a gray fortress of concrete and barbed wire. Passing through security felt like entering another world, cold, dark, filled with metallic echoes. A guard led me to the visitation room, a small, white space with a thick glass partition. I sat on a hard plastic chair, clasping my hands, trying to steady my racing heart. The door on the other side opened. My father walked in. I barely recognized him. Samuel Caldwell, once a man of imposing authority, was now haggard, his hair grayer, his face gaunt, his eyes weary. He wore an orange prison uniform, his hands cuffed, yet he tried to hold his head high, a fragile echo of the man I once knew. He sat, picked up the phone, and looked at me through the glass. "Jacob," he said, his voice thin, "thank you for coming." I didn't answer immediately. I just stared, as if at a stranger. "What do you want from me?" I asked, my voice colder than I intended. He attempted a weak smile, but it died quickly. "I just wanted to talk. I want you to know, I never meant to hurt you. I let things go too far." His voice faltered, but I felt no pity. His words were hollow, a poorly acted script. "You knew about the trust fund," I said, locking eyes with him. "You knew what Serena was doing, and you didn't stop her." He bowed his head, his eyes red, but he didn't deny it. "I was wrong, Jacob," he whispered. "I got caught up in ambition, in what Serena said. I thought she was doing what was best for the family." I let out a dry, humorless laugh. "Family? You called it a family? You chose her. You chose money. Over me." He didn't respond. His head lowered, as if my words were too heavy to bear. The door on his side opened again. Serena was let in. My blood ran cold. Her once glossy blonde hair was disheveled, her face harsh, stripped of the polished facade. Her eyes, cold and venomous, locked onto me. She picked up the phone, her voice clinging to that fake sweetness. "Jacob, you've misunderstood," she said. "The things in the basement, they were just spiritual rituals. I never meant to hurt you." I stared at her, my gaze unwavering. "Don't call me your son," I said, my voice low, sharp. "You tried to kill me, Serena. Stop lying." She stiffened, her lips trembling, her eyes burning with a hatred that told me she resented me for ruining her plans. "You don't understand," she muttered, her voice weakening. The truth was undeniable. I stood, setting the phone down. "I didn't come here to hear excuses," I said, looking from my father to Serena. "I came to say I'm done with you both. This family died a long time ago. I'm not your son anymore, and I'm not your family. I'm choosing my own life, and there's no place in it for either of you." I turned and walked out. I didn't look back. I heard my father call my name, his voice breaking, but I didn't stop. Stepping out of that prison, I breathed in the cold, free air, feeling as if I'd shed a burden carried for years. The visitation room door closed behind me. I knew it was also closing on my past. I was no longer chained by the memories of my father, Serena, or the Craftsman house steeped in darkness. Ahead of me lay an open road, and for the first time, I felt truly free. From that day forward, I severed all contact. No letters, no calls, no mention. They became a scar on my heart, but not something that defined me. I focused on the present, on building a future, on a dream I'd nurtured for years, to become a counselor, to help young people like me, those from broken families, find their own light. I enrolled in a graduate program for psychology. The months were a blur of classes, part-time shifts, late-night studies. Exhaustion sometimes crept in, but I'd look at my grandparents' letter tucked into my notebook and find strength. "Live true to your heart," they'd written, and I was determined to do just that. The $2 million trust fund was a heavy responsibility, but I managed it carefully. A portion covered my tuition and living expenses. The rest was invested long-term. I wanted the money to mean something more than just a number. So I established the Henry and Eleanor Fund in my grandparents' names to support children who, like me, grew up without a complete sense of home. Each thank you letter from a charity felt like an extension of their love. With the remaining funds, I bought a modest house in the Portland suburbs. Not the craftsman house with its painful memories, but a cozy place with large windows and a small garden. I painted the walls a soft blue, hung photos of my mother and grandparents, and slowly, deliberately, turned it into a true home. One afternoon, I called my mother, my voice hesitant but full of hope. "Mom," I said, "I want you to move in with me. This house, I want it to be our home." There was a pause, then her laugh, tinged with tears. "Jacob, my boy," she said, "I'll be there." And she was. She moved in, bringing her stories, her home-cooked meals, evenings of quiet reminiscing. For the first time in years, I felt I truly had a family, not bound by blood, but by love. As the months passed, an inner peace settled over me. The nightmares of the basement, the doll, and the jar of blood, they no longer haunted me. I stopped waking in the middle of the night. I no longer feared thoughts of my father or Serena. Instead, I found joy in simple things: brewing coffee for my mother, an inspiring class, an afternoon helping a child at the counseling center find words for their pain. My grandparents' memory became my guiding light. Their love, preserved in their letter and old photos, reminded me that true love wasn't from my father or Serena, but from those who chose to love unconditionally. I also learned lessons no classroom could teach. Blood doesn't always mean love. My father, once my world, chose greed over me. Serena, with her fake smiles and dark schemes, taught me that family isn't about shared blood, but about those who make you feel safe and loved. I learned to let go of hatred, not because they deserved it, but because I refused to become consumed by greed or malice like them. I chose forgiveness, not to erase what they did, but to free myself. My journey came to a quiet close one afternoon as I sat in my backyard garden, watching wildflowers sway in the breeze. I thought of the boy Jacob, once frightened and alone, believing he was unworthy of love. That boy had grown up, carrying scars, yes, but also a new, powerful belief. The past may leave its marks, but it does not dictate the future. I smiled, breathed in the fresh air, and felt a new beginning. Not loud or showy, but brimming with profound hope. My story didn't end with applause or fanfare. It ended in stillness, with the soft chirping of birds and sunlight filtering through the trees. In that moment, I knew I had found myself. Not the abandoned son, not the target of a plot, but Jacob Caldwell, a man ready to live with an open heart, despite the darkness that once tried to consume me. What would you have done if you discovered such a dark secret about your own family? Have you ever had to cut ties with someone you loved, even family, for your own peace? Share your thoughts in the comments below. I'm really curious to hear your perspective.